Hi to everyone, my name is Lourdes and I'm going to introduce myself very quickly. So I'm Spanish, but I've been living in France, in Paris, for more than 8 years already. I came here with a scholarship and I studied business at the École Supérieure de Commerce de Paris, where I also received my master's, and I also have a philosophy degree from La Sorbonne. So the reason why I'm creating this video today is because I wanted to share with you all my professional experience for the past 2 years, more than 2 years actually, working as a headhunter for private equity funds here in Paris. So that experience, aside from bringing a lot of knowledge about human nature, since I had the chance to interview hundreds of people from all kinds of ages, backgrounds, and also position in the business world. So aside from that, I had the chance to deconstruct many ideas and to learn many ideas around the professional world, such as how to look for a job, how to present oneself in a job interview, which is a topic I'm gonna leave for a different video, what to do if you're lost. So all these things have represented such an impactful realization in my life that I really felt as a moral duty, my need to share this with you all, as though you were my friends and I were simply telling you what I have learned, what are the reflections I have built over the past years. Obviously, I'm not going to share with you any magical formula because unfortunately it doesn't exist. But again, I'm just sharing my experience, and I also wanted to share the perspective of somebody who is from the other side, who is a recruiter, because I thought it might be useful for you to have that insight. First of all, let me say that even though I've only been working in the business world, in finance, all the advice I'm going to share with you, and I'm convinced of this, is perfectly applicable to any professional environment. That's the reason why this video is addressed not only to professionals who are starting their career or who already have a certain level of experience, but also to students who for the moment are only orienting themselves in the academic sphere. Also, one of the main reasons I wanted to share this information today is because not only have I been myself very lost in the past and lacking tools in order to orient myself properly, but also thanks to my work, I have witnessed how many people experience the same thing, how many people express the same problem of lacking meaning in their professional life, or not knowing how to look for their objectives, or not necessarily knowing how to do it in an effective way. And in any case, I have realized that that problem that is so common is not addressed in a proper way, not only at the level of universities but also among professionals. And again, what I want is to share the tools that I have been lacking, because as I said, I have been very lost. Despite being a very good student during all my life, it has always been very hard for me to orient myself, to take decisions, to make choices. I always experienced that with a lot of pressure, emotional pressure, and with a deep feeling of loneliness. And with the experience and the background that I have today, I have realized that problem is not atypical. So for anybody who is experienced that, that's a very normal feeling, but also it's not necessary to feel it with so much hopelessness and pain. So what I would like to give you are concrete tools in order to help you to start being active, because what I understand very well when one is lost is that there might be a tendency to avoid facing that work. And the problem is because there might be an emotional blockage about it, but the problem is that without any work invested, there won't be any results either. And also that leads to staying stuck in that situation of being lost. And indeed, let's make one thing clear, because as you can expect, nobody else can do this work but you. So it's important to realize, even though you're very young, even though this is the first time you have to start making an important decision about your life, whether it is your first academic path or whatever, just let's face the fact that for better or for worse, we are alone with our choices. And indeed, becoming an adult means taking responsibility for our choices. That is to say, becoming your own authority, integrating the father and mother archetype in yourself. So even though it is wise and humble to consult people who are trustworthy for you, any kind of mentor or parents or anybody who is important to you, it's always useful potentially to have their insight, their advice. But at the end, I insist, you are responsible for your choices, and other people cannot condition what you think or what you have to choose, but you cannot either make them responsible for your decisions. Because even if you make a decision that ends up being a mistake, it is better to learn from it than following a path that has been somehow imposed on you. Since I am talking about these reflections on taking responsibility, I am recalling now a sentence that I heard somewhere, which says, "In life, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate on." And I find this sentence painfully true but wise, and it sets very well the tone and the mindset of everything I would like to convey to you. Because this is not about questioning your value or letting yourself feel like a victim because the world doesn't recognize your talents or because you don't manage to find the path you think you deserve. But it is about, again, taking responsibility, becoming active, and learning how to navigate with that reality, what tools you can actually use, what power you actually have, in order to thrive and in order to carry out successfully your plans and your life and professional goals. The second observation, relevant and related to what I'm going to say, so aside from observing that many people feel lost, is that work is changing and that the pandemic is intensifying that trend. And also, and here I'm going to say something that is not a personal opinion, but just, again, a factual observation. Retirement seems to be, especially for my generation and future generations, a concept that seems doomed to become more and more abstract or even inexistent at some point. So all these elements create a paradigm shift that could also be used in a positive way, because this new reality forces us even more to be responsible, to take responsibility for our professional life and to try to be more aligned with a meaning. While many people might believe that this way of thinking is only relevant for privileged people, I have realized that this is not true, and that not only does everybody deserve finding meaning in their professional life, but also they should look for it. And I say this because when you are aligned with yourself and you have a clear view of what is your why in life, I absolutely believe that leads you to find the strength and also the imagination, which is a very important concept here, to activate some strategies, some actions that do inevitably lead you to change your reality and your professional life. So I'm going to start now to share with you all the clues, the tools that I have identified myself. They're not the most common ones, but my point is that they are relevant and effective. Very good. So the first idea I would like to share and to deconstruct is about the CV. It's a common belief to think that the first step one should take when one has to start a job research is I have to make a CV, I have to change it, I have to perfect it, I have to send it everywhere, and I have to learn how to sell myself. Well, let's start with the idea about the CV. Of course, it would be very irresponsible if I told you that the CV is not important. But as I told you, I'm here to tell you information that is not as common, but maybe more key and more important to take into account in a first moment. So, I believe that, especially if you're lost, it doesn't make any sense that you start by making the CV and by sending it, because you won't have invested the proper time to know yourself and consequently to identify what targets you have to set and what are all the academic or professional options that suit you well. So you're going to work on that CV, but later. And to do so, you can just consult the internet. There must be many tutorials about it, and I could potentially create a video about it another day. But again, I am here to tell you information that is less commonly spread and that is sometimes more key, especially to the people who have more problems and who are more lost. Also, I'm saying this because the CV, from my perspective at least, seems to become more and more a kind of formality. And also here I'm going to deconstruct a belief that I had, because I used to consider that the main approach when one has to look for a job is to send applications. So even though it is important to keep doing this, especially if you are sending applications to job announcements that do motivate you very much and for which you also are qualified. And with the experience I have today, I have realized that more and more jobs are obtained and also created through cooptation, that is to say through recommendations through the network. So here again, the traditional way of sending applications and the CV and so on becomes a kind of formality, because what is going to count is especially the link, the network you have and the relationship you have with that network, with those contacts you have. Here, especially to those ones who might panic when realizing that if you don't have a network, it's going to be very complicated to find a job. Well, I'm going to try to address this problem and give some information about what to do to also overcome the kind of emotional blockage one might have about building a network, and I'm going to leave that for my next videos. So the self-knowledge work is also more important and productive, also because it's going to help you in order to create your cover letter in which you're going to explain your motivations. But above all, it's going to help you to create a good speech that is going to be used when you are recommended, and that you're going to use in the context of the job interview. So the second idea I would like to deconstruct is the expression I just evoked before about having to learn how to sell yourself. Well, we, the people, we're not products, and whoever wants to think so, it's his or her problem. But you should not whatsoever believe that, and you shouldn't either formulate it, articulate it that way. Because again, it is very important, and we should be very watchful and careful about the way we say things, because that conveys our beliefs and consequently our attitude and even our actions regarding a certain area of life. So forget that, because it is not about selling yourself, it's about telling yourself, it's about telling your story. So it is important to realize this, because not only this is actually the truth, but also thinking the contrary is really damaging, especially for the people who already have a certain insecurity, who are already very stressed, because when they are for instance, in a job interview, they're going to have that added pressure of having to show a lot of self-confidence, whereas again, let's forget that silly idea, because self-confidence is self-knowledge. Don't fool yourself. Self-knowledge is what leads to self-confidence. When you know yourself, you become more at ease with yourself, and also you make more at ease the people who are in front of you, and that is real and authentic self-confidence. So again, this is another reason for justifying the importance of cultivating the self-knowledge work. And also, let me say that from my perspective of a recruiter, when somebody comes to a job interview with that attitude of wanting to sell something, of having a somehow forced behavior, at least I do perceive that immediately, and for me at least it makes that the person loses credibility right away. And trust me, there is nothing deeply wrong about who you are, so just stay authentic, because authenticity is the best thing you can do to differentiate yourself, to be impactful in your speech. And truth is convincing by itself. Truth is enough. So no need to add anything else. You can only work on how to perfect maybe that speech that comes from truth, but no need to replace it or to add false elements. Now I'm going to share with you some ideas, some tools in order to help you undertake that work on self-knowledge. The first idea is very simple, and it relies on creating a list in which you're going to list down, in which you're going to indicate all the things you love in life, whether they are values, activities, places, whatever. There is total freedom. But in order to address this work properly, I'm going to advise you to totally forget the professional concerns. So don't think about work, just pay attention to yourself. So once you have finished that list, and by the way, it could be interesting to indicate as well all the things you don't like in life. So once you have that list, you're going to use it for different purposes. The first function of this list could be to become a kind of framework to which you can refer yourself when you have to decide or to compare some professional or academic options you are considering. Because what you're going to do is simply comparing between that list you have created and the list in which you would have considered all the professional or academic options you're thinking about. You're simply going to observe which options have more points of correspondence with respect to the original list. Secondly, the other function is to use the list in order to start or to imagine, to look for new ideas and new options of professional or academic objectives again. Because you're simply going to look for paths that correspond well with the ingredients of that list. And thirdly, the last option is to use the list in order to potentially create your own job, your own activity, or your own business. Because somehow when things don't seem to work out and you don't manage to find in the outside world the professional path that fulfills you, maybe the problem is not you, nothing is wrong about you, but just something is wrong about keeping the same strategy. So what you could do is just a changing of strategy and creating that job yourself. I'm not saying this is the easiest solution, but I'm just reminding you that it's still an option that is available to you. The second idea about self-knowledge I would like to share is to create another list in which you could indicate all the areas in which you think you are better. So it could be skills, but also qualities and even aspects of your personality, because they do count as well. And here I would like to address something, especially to those of you who might think right now, there's nothing at which I am better than other people. Or on the contrary, those ones who might think that they are better in many domains than the average people. Well, let's remind ourselves that this comes from the ego. It is the ego that leads us to have an extreme opinion about ourselves, whether it is in the positive or the negative extreme. So when you are when you are undertaking this self-knowledge process, just let's remember that it is important to keep an honest and objective consideration towards oneself. However, it is still possible that it might be still hard for some people to identify elements. So in that case, it could be interesting to consult people, close people to you who are very trustworthy, because again, this is kind of touchy, and it is important to remember that even though the opinion of others might be inspiring or revealing to you, at the end, what counts the most is the view you have about yourself, and that's what should matter above all when you have to take a decision. So I say this of trying to call others in order to have an exterior gaze, because somehow it is true that we can be blind about aspects of ourselves. The third tool I'm going to share now is to use the personality tests. Well, I'm not very fond of personality tests in general, but I think that some of them are very useful and could be relevant, especially to those ones who want to broaden a little bit more their self-knowledge work. So the two ones that I like the most are the MBTI, and especially my favorite one is the Enneagram. I find the Enneagram very powerful. I use it all the time at work. I also use it in my personal life. I find it very enjoyable, and also it is a tool that, at least for me, it has helped me a lot to know myself better. So I'm going to list down below some websites that I find trustworthy, that I find good, in order to take those tests if you are interested about it. Obviously, no test is going to define in a complete way who you are, and your personality cannot be condensed in a simple type. But I think it can be useful to refer oneself to certain archetypes. I like to think in that way, in terms of archetypes, that might help you to bring into the awareness, to be conscious about some unconscious patterns we might have, and that are important to take into account when we take decisions in life in general, but also in our professional life. Excellent. So the fourth tool I'm going to share with you is to observe where your energy seems to flow. What I mean by this: for instance, you could try to pay attention when you are in a job interview and you are describing aspects of your daily life at work, some activities you achieve daily. And try to observe it if at some moments there is a smile that appears in your face, because that smile, while you're describing something you do, is going to be the reflection of the love and the happiness that thing brings to you. Another way of identifying where your energy flows, and actually the easiest one maybe, is to simply observe those thoughts that come frequently to your mind, that topic of conversation that is very frequent when you speak to your friends, to your family, to your close ones, that activity to which you go back, and even almost unconsciously, and maybe while you have other priorities. And it is very important to realize and to identify this, because where your energy seems to flow is where your energy is regenerated. And where your energy is regenerated, when your energy seems to become infinite, is where you're going to give the best of yourself. This naturally implies that somebody who is not motivated, who dislikes very much his work, is inevitably doomed to mediocrity, because that person is not going to try to progress in his know-how, in his skills and in his qualities at the job he's doing. Let me be clear here, because when I say to observe where your energy seems to flow, I don't imply whatsoever, I don't mean that you should dedicate yourself only to those activities that do not require effort and that are very easy for you. No, what I mean is just that try to observe, try to pay attention to those activities in which, for instance, the 30 minutes during which you're doing that activity, your perception of time and your resistance is going to be significantly different from the other 30 minutes you're going to do an activity that you dislike, and at which at the end you're going to experience a fatigue, because yes, there's going to be an effort, but it's going to be an effort combined with a sense of satisfaction, a satisfaction that comes from the identification between what you have accomplished, what you have created, and yourself, your interests and deep motivations. And this, as opposed to a fatigue that I would qualify as a fatigue of emptiness. This I would illustrate for you with the example of people who take the subway at the end of the day. You can, if you live in a big city like New York, I guess you know very well what that looks like and how it feels, even because it's something you can even perceive and feel in an energetic and emotional level. And just try to observe that kind of fatigue that seems to emanate from a lot of people. That is a fatigue that is scary for me, because it's a fatigue that I don't only analyze or see as a fatigue of a physical fatigue or intellectual fatigue that is normal after a work day, but it is even a fatigue of the soul. That is what is appalling almost. And I think that fatigue of the soul comes from the fatigue of emptiness, which is, in my opinion, created when the person doesn't identify himself or herself at work, when the know-how and the know-be, what we would say in French, the savoir-être, that the person exercises at his job do not correspond with his own values or with his vision of his best self. Excellent. So the fifth clue I'm going to introduce to you is to learn how to identify and also differentiate your extrinsic from your intrinsic motivations. So for those who don't understand, the intrinsic motivations are those ones that are connected with our interiority, with ourselves, whereas the extrinsic motivations are connected with the outside world, with other people and so on. So a very common example of extrinsic motivation would be choosing a certain career or academic path as well in order to please one of your parental figures or both of them. Another very typical extrinsic motivation, the most common one actually, is money. Money is an extrinsic motivation for everybody. Everybody works in order to earn money. But the problem is, and this is something that I've seen very often at my work, because in finance people tend to earn more money than in other jobs, and unfortunately they end up identifying their value with what they earn. That is to say, they believe that because they earn X, their value is X. But the reality is not that one is worth X amount of money, but that one is selling the time of his life for X amount of money. So let's be very careful about this, and let's ensure that what for which you're selling the time of your life is meaningful for you. And obviously I am not judging anybody, and I perfectly understand that, again, for everybody intrinsic and extrinsic motivations are always going to be present, but I'm just trying to make you aware about their existence, and just to make sure that the extrinsic motivation doesn't become overpowering and doesn't take the control over the intrinsic motivation. Because even though in the short term we might think that the best choice maybe is the one that is fitting with the extrinsic motivation, because that maybe gives more security or whatever, at the end, at some point, we're going to experience a problem. And I am also perfectly aware that for some people it is impossible to respond to that or to respect that, because there are major imperatives and responsibilities in their life, like maybe paying the studies of their kids or whatever. And I am aware of this, and that's very noble. But again, I believe that we always have a certain amount of freedom or of power in order to change or to improve our reality a little bit. And even though maybe your current reality doesn't enable you to change your job or to take any kind of action, try to make sure that you are defining that in a certain amount of time. What I mean is that it's really bad if your horizon is always the same, and you think you're gonna end up stuck in that job you dislike forever, because that's going to drain even more your vital energy, and it's going to weaken you until the point you won't be able to make any move, and you won't even want to do it consciously or not. So let's always stick to a project, a long-term plan. Even though right now your reality is very hard, try to start thinking about what little steps you can do in the future, because I'm sure there's something, even though it's something very small, you can do to create more faith or positive changes in your life. Well, a last example I'm going to give about the extrinsic motivation that is inspired, that comes from an interview, a job interview that I had, not myself, but with another person that I interviewed. And it's one of the most striking ones I had, I think. And it was an interview with a girl who was around my age, more or less. So she was very elegantly dressed, very self-confident. She was wearing her very high heels and her Louis Vuitton bag. Well, what I mean is that she was the symbol of the image of the successful businesswoman, if you want. So during the interview, she explains that she has always been very competitive. She has always been a very good student. She has always tried to follow the most elitist path. She was working in a private equity fund. Sorry, I forgot to say this. And at some moment, I just intervened and I asked her a question that was, okay, I understand that you've always wanted to be the best one. You've always decided to do what teachers or what the exterior said to be the most elitist path. You have tried to you have raised it socially compared to your family. Okay, this is very good. But I would like, I'm just curious, I'm interested to know what is the motivation behind, I mean the inner motivation behind your path and all the choices you've done so far, you've made so far. So at that moment, even though that girl was very, very smart, she was totally puzzled and she was unable to utter a word. I mean, she was unable to respond to my question, whereas for me the question was not that complicated. And I think the reason why she was unable to respond to it is because she didn't ask that question to herself. And at that moment, she was very brave, and she even shared that she was in therapy. She even got emotional at that moment, and she said that indeed she was experiencing a kind of emptiness in her life that she didn't know how to analyze or understand or identify. And I personally think that what happened to that girl is that she was very disconnected from herself and from her inner motivations. And even though from the exterior being or representing a model or an image of professional success, the inner reality was very different. So what I mean by this, and I am not whatsoever judging anybody nor judging that girl and not judging either wanting material success in life. The only problem for me comes when that becomes an end, a purpose in itself. What I just want to express is again the impact of not bringing to the awareness the existence of those motivations, and the impact of not connecting with oneself, and again not trying to know oneself. So I have already shared the first 5 tools in order to address the self-knowledge work. There's going to be a second video in which I'm going to present the other tools. And I thank you a lot for watching this video. As I said at the beginning, this was very important to me. And I hope that you liked it. If you did, please like my video and also subscribe to my channel. I am very interested in knowing your reactions, your suggestions. And also, please, if you have any personal experience that is suitable to this topic, please share it, because the more we have complementary information from your personal accounts, the more this content is going to be useful and complete for everybody. So thank you very much, and see you in my next video.